Hi, everybody, and welcome back to this session of the 2020 Thought Leader Symposium presented by Intern. My name is Dr. Robert Schindel. I'm going to be your host and moderator for this session, and I'm excited. Stephen Rothberg and is from College Recruiter, and Heather are with us to talk about something that I think is so critically important. And I don't want to take anything away from what's going to be presented, but my goodness, this is something that we should all be concerned about. I'm glad that you're joining us today. Stephen, Heather, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I'm actually looking out my window and the snowflakes are just starting. So we're excited. If you live up here in Minnesota, as Heather Favors, our customer service manager, and I both do, then you have to like winter or you have to be crazy, or both. But today's webinar, we are going to be talking about what we at College Recruiter call fraudulent job postings. We're going to get into a definition of exactly what we mean by that, whose role it is to sort of combat that, why they're happening, etc. But just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, this is me, and there's my contact information. Certainly feel free, during the session, afterward, whatever, call me, email me, connect me on LinkedIn, tweet me, whatever. I'm happy to talk and help as I can. So in today's session, we're going to talk for maybe 15 seconds about what College Recruiter is, to help you sort of better see that we're not trying to pitch you in this presentation, trying to sell you anything. Our interests are quite well aligned with those of the career service offices and their software providers. As I was saying a second ago, we're going to define what we mean by a fraudulent job posting and why we should care. We're going to talk a little bit about what some of the schools are doing and their software providers, like the Grad Leaders, Handshakes, 1220s of the world. And then Heather's going to get into detail. This is a part of her job that she spends, unfortunately, we all think too much time on. We wish she didn't have to spend any time, but it is necessary for us to spend time on, and she's accountable for proactively identifying fraudulent job postings, occasionally dealing reactively with postings that snuck through, and what we do about those to help prevent that we don't let future ones sneak through. So first of all, College Recruiter is a job search site. We believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career. About 2.5 million students and recent grads use our site a year to find part-time, seasonal, internship, and entry-level jobs. The students and grads who are using our site come from all different kinds of schools: one-year schools, two-year schools, four-year schools, grad schools, etc. At any given time, we have about 750,000 postings on our site, and roughly a third of those turn over every day, because the market has primarily shifted from duration-based postings, which means typically that you post a job for 14 or 30 days or some timeline like that. But most of the recruitment ads, our job posting ads online now, are pay-per-click, and so an employer will pay, X dollars for Y clicks. And when that's been delivered, if it's 2 days or 20 days, then the posting comes down. So there's a lot more turnover, which means there's a lot more work in this area for us and everybody else in this ecosystem. So what do we mean by a fraudulent job posting? It's essentially, in most cases, it's essentially going to be a scenario where a scammer, or we call them sometimes fraudsters, will steal the identity of a legitimate company. That company might be Sony, it might be McDonald's, it might be Google, it might be 3M, but the scammer, most of which are overseas, but not all, will pretend that they're a talent acquisition manager, a recruiter, a hiring manager, whatever, for a very well-known organization. And they will often post a job that looks to be absolutely legitimate. And sometimes it is a legitimate job. They will go to the company's website, they will copy an actual posting, and they will send it to us or to you with an email address that looks almost identical to the actual employer's email address. We're going to get into the reasons as to why they do this and how we detect them. a little bit later. But the vast majority of what we are now seeing as fraudulent job postings appear at first blush to be legitimate job postings. You can't just look at it and say, I don't know this company. And in fact, if you just look at it and say, I know this company, then you're doing exactly what the scammers are hoping that you're going to do. So what's happening? The scammers, the people that are posting these bogus job postings or posting what are real jobs, but posting them in a way that they received the information, the resume, the other application related information. What they're doing in most cases is that they're trying to get the job seeker, in this case we're talking about students, to apply to those jobs. And why do they do that? There are a number of reasons, but two of the most common reasons are that they're trying to get the contact information, work history, education history, sometimes banking information, sometimes social security numbers from those job seekers. And for anybody who's ever even had a credit card number stolen, you know that best case scenario, it's a real pain to deal with that. Worst case scenario, you can literally have your credit ruined for the rest of your life. If you have a bad credit rating, many employers won't hire you. Regardless of what explanation they give you, they're going to pull up a credit report on you and they're going to see that you've got a 520 and they're going to say, well, you know, she can't manage her own financial affairs. We certainly can't trust her to be a manager here. I understand the reasons why some employers might look at credit history when making employment evaluations, especially in jobs that require the use of money, you know, CFO, accountant, whatever. We can debate another time, maybe next year, Robert, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but the reality is it is. Most large employers are looking at credit history, criminal history, that type of stuff when determining whether or not to hire someone. Another reason why scammers will impersonate a legitimate company is that it has nothing to do with stealing the contact information and applying for credit in the name of the job seeker, but it may be to trick that job seeker into thinking that they're actually employed by a legitimate company. They might offer them a remote internship or part-time job or something along those lines. Until a couple of years ago, most of those jobs fell into just a few buckets. The company would pretend that they're in Latvia and say that they can't buy books online from Amazon. So here's $20, you buy the book from Amazon for $13 and ship it to me and you can keep the change. And the job seeker will do that a few times. The employer will come back and say, wow, you know, what a great job you're doing, but it's kind of a pain to be sending you money by PayPal or something along those lines. Why don't we ACH the money or wire the money directly into your bank account? So all I need you to do is to send me a voided check and just take a photo of it on your phone and then email it to me. And as soon as that happens, now that quote unquote employer, the scammer, they have all your contact information. They've got your address, they've got your education history, they've got your work history, they probably have your social security number, and now they also have your banking information. And with that, they can empty your bank account. Now, again, maybe you're liable for that as the quote unquote employee, the victim. Maybe you're not. Best case scenario, it's going to be a real pain to get that fixed. And if they emptied out your bank account and now you weren't able to pay your rent on time, your landlord's not going to care that somebody from Eastern Europe or whatever ripped you off, and that's why you couldn't make your rent. Your landlord's only going to care that you didn't make your rent, and that could impact your credit. And as soon as it impacts your credit, very often there's just no turning back. You can't get an Experian or TransUnion or Equifax to improve your credit because you were the victim of fraud. You should be able to, but it just doesn't happen. So what do we need to do? And I'm talking about everybody in this ecosystem, the software providers like the Handshakes and Simplicities of the world, the job search sites like College Recruiter, and the career service office sites. we all need to really up our game. We need to become a heck of a lot more vigilant. We can't just look at a job posting on the surface and say, this kind of looks scammy. I'm not going to allow that to run. Or, that's from McDonald's. Of course, I know McDonald's must be legitimate. I'm going to let that run. We need to dig into it and really make sure that we know who's posting and that the position is legitimate. And we need to do that proactively. The vast majority of what is happening out there for fraud, quote unquote, prevention is not proactive at all. It's reactive. We're waiting for complaints. When I talk about we, I'm talking about the organizations throughout this ecosystem. We're mostly waiting for complaints from job seekers, from our students, that they've been ripped off, that they've been defrauded, before we take any action. And that's just wrong. It's kind of like saying to people, you know what, don't lock your doors, have your windows open and have big stacks of money piled up. And if somebody comes along and breaks into your house and takes the money, then we'll tell other people on the block that maybe they should draw their blinds, maybe they should lock their doors. We should be telling people proactively how to protect themselves, and we should be doing what we can to proactively protect the students who are using our systems. They're using our systems because they trust us. And if you're one of the schools, they're using your systems because you're strongly encouraging them to, and they're a paying customer. They're paying you loads of money in tuition, and you have an obligation to them to do what you can to take care. So if you allow fraudulent postings to go live and then take them down after you hear complaints, it's kind of like allowing that fox to come into the hen house and eat only 1 or 2 hens and then getting rid of the fox to protect the other hens. I really, really doubt that that first or second hen that gets gobbled up by the fox is going to be okay with that, knowing that the other hens are going to be protected. None of the hens should be harmed by that fox. Just 1 or 2, that's not acceptable. So again, we need to agree that being proactive is necessary with what's going on today, not reactive, which might have been fine until 5 years ago. I reached out to all of the major software providers and asked them to let me, told them about this webinar, gave them a link to it, actually encouraged them to sign up for it. And I also told them that I would be more than happy to share with this group what it is that they're doing, that the software providers are doing with respect to fraudulent job postings. Handshake, which is certainly one of the biggest providers, one of the best known, was the only one that came back to me with detailed information and I think a well thought out proactive process. Some of what they are doing, they're not able to share. They don't want the scammers to know everything that they're doing because that would make it easier for the scammers to then try to get around Handshake system. But let's take a minute and look at the sorts of things that Handshake has invested time and money into. They have a team that just is devoted to trust and safety. So they're looking for postings that are fraudulent. They have invested money in people, and I'm sure some systems, software tools to help them identify fraudulent job postings and remove them both proactively or block them proactively and remove them reactively. They're using behavior-based analysis. We at College Recruiter are doing the same sort of thing. They're exactly what steps they're following, I don't know. And quite frankly, I shouldn't know. That should stay within Handshake. We're going to get into some details during Heather's portion of the discussion. One of the things that they're also doing is that they're blocking suspicious domains. So if somebody comes to Handshake with a domain like Microsoft with 2 T's on the end, .com, Handshake will see that, they'll realize that that is fraudulent, and then they will block all future postings probably even registrations from anybody using a Microsoft with 2 T's on the end .com domain. Similarly, the IP addresses, which is it's a numerical number that shows with pretty good accuracy where your computer is located. You can spoof it. You can be in Ethiopia and you can use a spoofing device to pretend that you're in the United Kingdom. It's rare when that happens. You can also have some inaccuracies. Years and years ago, when we had a lot of visitors coming to us from AOL, they all appeared to be coming from AOL's headquarters in Virginia. So our traffic numbers, when we were looking at where's our traffic coming from geographically, it was heavily skewed. But probably 95% of the IP addresses that your web developer or tech folks are looking at are pretty accurate. So what we do is that if we see that an IP address is from outside of North America, we block it, and I suspect that Handshake is doing something along the same lines. Again, Heather will get into more details on that. If there is a job that's posted to Handshake, and Handshake says, you know what, clearly this is fraudulent, then they're just simply not going to send that over to the school for approval. If it's clearly legitimate, they are going to send it over to the school for approval. And then if it falls into that gray zone where it maybe is okay, maybe not, what Handshake has told me is that they're providing an alert at the same time to the school. You know, hey, be a little extra careful with this one. It might be okay, it might not be, but you need to look at this one more carefully. And then of course, they're constantly adding more steps as we do. The best way that we just can describe what's happening in this area is cat and mouse. Every time the cat, the Handshakes, the college recruiters, the schools of the world get better, the mouse gets better too. So if you've got the same systems in place that you did 5 years ago and they were working really, really well 5 years ago, then you need to update your systems. The only other software provider that came to me with any feedback whatsoever from my pretty simple, straightforward question, and I gave them a whole month to respond, were our friends over at 1220. Now what 1220 does is they make the schools that use 1220 responsible for policing the job postings. They do require payment, which Handshake does not, for job postings. For 1220, if a job is posted network-wide, so to all of their schools, then the employer needs to pay for that. And that provides 1220 with the ability to at least look at the credit card. Is this credit card in the same name as the person posting the job? If not, and Heather will get into it, you've got a couple of steps to go there. If it is in the same person's same name, does the address match up? Does the IP address match up? There's some very easy automated things that you can do when you require an employer to accept payment. So the fact that they're requiring payment for their network-wide postings, that helps. And then again, 1220, as was the case with Handshake, as is the case with College Recruiter, as is the case with all of us. They're doing additional things, and there's some more steps that are coming down the pipe. So who did not respond to the survey? If any of you are using any of these 6, the very first thing that I would do at the conclusion of this webcast is to email your account manager and ask them why they didn't respond. Maybe they've got a fantastic system in place and they just didn't want to take the time, the 5 minutes that it would take to respond like 1220 or Handshake did. That's unfortunate, because if they had taken out those 5 minutes, we would all benefit. A rising tide lifts all ships. Maybe they don't have a process, or maybe they're embarrassed about their process. I can't think of a good reason why any one of these 6 did not respond, knowing what the purpose of this webcast was, which was to prevent the students who are relying on us as an ecosystem to help them find great new careers. So again, I would contact your account managers and I would demand, as their customer, to know the details, and I would look at that critically. You might want to have a meeting to talk about what steps is Handshake taking, what steps is 1220 taking, what steps is College Recruiter taking, why aren't why isn't your provider doing all of that and perhaps more? You have the right to demand answers, and you should. So at this point, I'm going to hand over the presentation to our recently promoted customer service manager, Heather Favors, and she is going to dive into some of the nitty gritty that College Recruiter does. Heather, if you'll just let me know when to advance the slides, I will be happy to do so.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Heather Favors. I'm the customer service manager at College Recruiter. Stephen, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to be discussing the proactive steps that we take within our anti-fraud procedures for job postings. There are several things we do to assist with identifying these fraudulent postings, and we'll kind of go over some of those today. Next slide, please. The first step I wanted to discuss is the employer's email address. Some scammers, they'll falsely claim to work for a recognized company and will use an email address that is similar to a valid email address for that company. And you'll notice the syntax in the email address is incorrect. In the example you can see here, this contact appears to work for Wells Fargo. As you can see in the first email address, it appears suspicious. So they may provide all legitimate information for Wells Fargo, but when you see that syntax, that's definitely a red flag, and therefore we would consider them a scammer. Next slide, please. When you notice that the syntax is incorrect in their email address, you can also compare it to the website's domain provided by the buyer. Does it match? It might not match, but it should a majority of the time. Another thing you can do, if you've had previous contact with that company or employer, that is definitely a strong indicator that the job posting is legitimate. But if you have an account for them and you've had no previous contact with the buyer for that posting, we definitely recommend verifying the posting's legitimate and using the steps that we're discussing today. This definitely should include picking up the phone. Did the buyer provide a phone number? If they did, does that number go to a live person? Does it go to the main number for that company or something like Google Voice? If it's something like Google Voice, that's almost never going to be a legitimate account or a job posting. As a last step, and only if you feel like all the other information the buyer provided is legitimate, you can take that extra step of researching the company headquarters. You can go to Google, you can find their main number, and just call and verify if the buyer and the credit card holder are employed for that company. Next slide, please. So legitimate accounts often will have a recruiter or other professional purchase a job posting with either their manager's credit card, possibly somebody in their payables department. So a mismatch is not always a cause for concern, but if the buyer and the cardholder are matched, that's almost always an indicator that the purchase is going to be legitimate. Next slide, please. So another thing I want to discuss is clerical errors. This can often be an indicator that a job posting is fraudulent. An example of this would be, say, they enter their position as a customer service representative when actually the job title for the job posting they're trying to post is a customer service representative. You can look for things like proper grammar, a legitimate address. Basically, if anything looks off to you, look into the posting further just to be on the safe side. Next slide, please. Another tool that we use for verification is LinkedIn. Does the contact have a LinkedIn profile? Does the company have a LinkedIn profile? They are not always going to have a profile, and that's okay. Sometimes just the purchaser will have a profile or vice versa, only the company. That doesn't mean it's fraud, but it definitely could be an indicator. Next slide, please. Another proactive way that we catch scammers is to block all IP addresses outside of North America. Stephen mentioned this earlier, and once we took this step with our credit card processor, our fraudulent postings decreased dramatically. That's not to say you'll never have someone attempt to purchase a job posting outside of North America. Sometimes your buyers will be traveling. They'll want to post a legitimate job in North America. Normally these buyers, if that happens, they'll reach out to you because they'll question why their credit card wasn't working. And at that point, you can explain to them why and then just set up an alternate payment option. Next slide, please. So what if you decide someone is a suspected scammer? You're not sure. After you've looked at all these steps and you're just still scratching your head, maybe, maybe not. Our standard procedure is to send out what we call internally an anti-fraud questionnaire. This questionnaire will ask for details of the company, the buyer, and the credit card holder. A legitimate buyer will almost always respond to this email. What our policy is we'll allow the buyer 24 hours to respond. If we don't get a response within that 24 hours, we'll deactivate them in our database. We'll refund the transaction before we even approve it. And as I mentioned before, sometimes you might be wrong, and that's okay, because if they reach out to you after that 24 hours, there'll be steps in place where you can get that job live for them and collect payment. I just want to share an example of this. Recently, we had a customer post a job. We'd never done business with them. They didn't have a LinkedIn profile for their company or for themselves. And like I said before, this doesn't mean they're a scammer, but it raises a red flag. So what we did is we went out and sent out that anti-fraud questionnaire, and they emailed me back, gave me all the information I requested, such as the credit card holder's information and theirs. And this buyer was later determined to be a scammer due to a charge being disputed by the cardholder. So what we went ahead and did is immediately deactivated the customer's account. We blacklisted them from our sites. Obviously, the card was refunded. These scammers are constantly evolving and honestly getting more sophisticated with their antics, which means we are always looking to improve our anti-fraud procedure, and it's situations like this that remind us why we definitely need to stay on top of it. So what I'm getting across here is to always err on the safe side. If you're not convinced that this job posting or the buyer is legitimate, treat them as a scammer. Taking these steps we went over today will help ensure that these students are not becoming victims of identity theft. So with all that being said, I'm going to hand this back to Stephen to wrap things up. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks so much, Heather. So, again, and I just can't emphasize this enough, the approach that we've taken at College Recruiter, largely guided by Heather, has been to almost assume the worst. That if there are some red flags there, we're going to take the position that this prospective buyer needs to prove that they're legitimate to us before we're going to allow that job posting to go live. It's the reverse of the traditional approach in our industry, which is that you're innocent until proven guilty. Internally, we approach it as they're guilty until they prove their innocence. Now, let me just emphasize for those of you who feel a little bit queasy about it, it does not mean that we need to interact with that customer in a way where we think that they're guilty. We don't treat them with disrespect. We don't accuse them of anything. But basically what we're doing is we're communicating to them that we're trying to protect the students using our site, which makes us a better resource, a more trusted resource, which helps that employer hire more people by advertising their positions with us. If we're not trusted, then the students aren't going to use our site. If you're not trusted, they're not going to use your site. It's to everybody's detriment if there's not trust there. So internally, we'll talk about the red flags. Internally, we'll talk about how suspicious the registration is or the posting or something along those lines. But we're not going out there and publicly pointing fingers. Even in an email to that employer, we're not going to say, hey, your job posting is full of spelling mistakes and blah, blah, blah. We think you're a scammer. We just don't say that. But what we do is we will gather more information from them. And like Heather said, what we definitely see are the legitimate employers actually appreciating the process. It's not a time-consuming process more than just a few minutes. And virtually all of the postings that we identify as being probably fraudulent, where we're asking for more information or digging into it more, those people just disappear. But that last example that Heather raised was unusual. I'm not even sure if we've had one like that before, but that scammer really went the extra length. They had an entire website set up that looked completely legitimate. The postings looked legitimate. The credit card looked fine. Everything lined up. And we were basically doing our due diligence because they were new to us, and everything looked fine. And we let the posting go through, and I think a day or two later, the actual card holder put in a chargeback, and we were notified by our bank, by our merchant service provider, that there's a chargeback on the account. We looked into it, and then we blocked, took down the posting and blocked them. So sometimes it is necessary to be reactive like that. What we're trying to urge here is that we should all, as an industry, be doing what we can to be proactive rather than just reactive. So proactivity earns trust. And if you've got a student who uses your career service office website and applies to a job, and that job proves to be fraudulent, maybe their bank account gets emptied, maybe somebody takes out a loan or a credit card in their name, that student is going to share that with 5,000 of their closest friends. And they should, quite frankly. If we are not doing, as an industry, what we can to protect them, then what we're basically doing is we're abdicating that, and we're pushing that off onto the job seeker. And so what they're doing is saying, hey, if my career service office, if the job board or whatever that I'm using, if they won't protect my friends and me, then they're telling me that we need to protect ourselves, and we will. And one way that we're going to do that is by sharing with each other information about how to better protect ourselves. So expect your students to trash you if you don't do a good job. What they're trying to do is to protect their friends. There might be a little bit of vengeance in there too, but I guess I just can't blame them if they do that. Our call to action today, if you take away nothing else from this presentation, it's that you should talk to your software people. If you've got a homegrown system, talk to the people who are maintaining it. If you're using a Handshake, a Grad Leaders, a Simplicity, a College Central, a 1220, talk to your account manager and get specific information. It's not just enough for them to say, yes, we are combating fraud. Yes, we are looking for fraudulent postings and taking them down. Get specific. How are they doing that? When are they doing that? Are they letting all postings go through and then only taking down the ones where there are complaints? That is very, very 2012. Or are they proactively looking for postings like Handshake does, like College Recruiter does, and not even letting those postings go live in the first place? Find out. If they're not doing a good enough job, demand it. These are your students, they are your customers, and the identity theft issue is real, and we have an obligation to protect them. And Robert, that brings us to the end of our presentation. Heather and I are more than happy to answer questions. People have ideas for more ways to identify fraud. We would be more than happy to learn from the attendees today.
Stephen, Heather, thank you so much. There's so many. I found myself like getting angry as you were going through this, because I'm angry because there are people out in this world that would want to do that. And, those of us who are in the career services space, we are generally, these altruistic, we want to help people and we don't want to hurt people. And so this is so, I don't know, it's just so maddening that there's an entire industry out there that's devoted to trying to hurt people. And that's bothersome. One of the questions that I think is really important is, as a university or as a career center office, let's say that something slips through. What's the liability on us?
That's a good question. Let me come back to that in a second, because there's a word that you just used to sort of to describe the word industry, and I think that that's worth noting. Those of us who know more about this than we wish we had to know that it truly is an industry. What we're dealing with here, not entirely but largely, is organized crime. And whether the organized criminals are in the US or in Russia or in Nigeria or in New Zealand, it's rarely the case where it's just one person sitting at a desk in a bedroom doing this part-time for kicks and giggles. These are actual organizations where you have software providers, you've got the customer service type people who are registering at our sites and posting ads. There's coordination. They're buying and selling credit card information, and then the data that they might obtain from the student, they're following up, right? This is not generally one person. It's an organization, and we need to realize they're at least as sophisticated as we are. So let me come back to the liability piece of it. So for those of you who know me, you probably have heard me half jokingly say that I'm a fully recovered lawyer. So I have a law degree, practiced for a year, and then one of my other favorite jokes is I got out of it to enjoy my life. So in no way, shape, or form is this legal advice, but I would think that this would fall under the negligence category. That generally, if you've got a disclaimer or a waiver on your site that says something to the effect that the student is using it at their own risk, that's a contractual agreement between you and your user, and contracts cannot be used to protect you from negligence claims. So if you pay someone $5 to drive your car across the street, and they get into your car and you know that there's something funky going on, you've been smelling gas and you see that there's some flames coming out of the engine, and they start to drive and the car blows up, guess what? That contract is not going to protect you from that negligence. If you've got an obligation to keep your sidewalks well maintained, and you tell your tenant in a contract that they're responsible for any harm that happens to them on your premises, but they trip and they fall and they break their cheekbone, they can still come after you for negligence because you had an obligation to take care of your sidewalk. It seems to me that we're probably talking about the same thing here. If that job posting that Heather was talking about, and then I talked a little bit about too, where we did our due diligence, we spent a significant amount of time on it, and we did a lot of digging into it to help ensure that it did not, that fraudulent postings wouldn't go live, and it slipped through our systems. I think that any court would look at that and say, look, that you tried, and you can't be perfect. We understand that. It's like a surgeon, right? If surgeons can make mistakes and they're not guilty of negligence, but if they make a mistake that they should not have made, then they're going to be guilty of negligence, regardless of the waiver that you might have signed when you went in for surgery. So I would suggest for the schools on the call that you talk to your legal office and ask them, could we be liable? Even if it's a case where the legal office says, well, it's really unlikely that there's liability there, I think the follow-up question would be, what's it going to cost us in terms of time and money to defend ourselves if we're sued? Because that can be just as costly as the lawsuit. For the software providers, I know that their positions, software providers will typically say, we aren't responsible for anything. We're not going to guarantee you in any way, shape, or form that the software we provide to you is fit for the purpose, is actually does what it's supposed to do. And it helps to insulate them from liability, but it doesn't completely insulate them from liability. So if you've got software that people are exploiting and you should have fixed it, you know about the problems, then you're going to potentially have some liability there. I hope that helps.
No, and it does, and I'm glad that we address that, because that's a question that I get a lot as I talk about and work with college and universities on their internship initiatives. And this idea of, let's say we post an unpaid internship, and the student takes it and then they sue. Are we liable in any way? And I think it's important for us to understand the deep ramifications of this. And I think that you and Heather both did just such a fantastic job of really kind of bringing this and the seriousness of this, and again, the illustrating the industry that's out there that is looking to harm us. And these are vulnerable individuals that they're targeting because they want jobs, they want so there's a desire and a lack of maturity in some of our students, that they would just say, oh yeah, let me just jump in here and type this away and blah blah blah, and before you know it, their bank account's cleared out, and all of that good stuff. So I think as higher ed, we really do need to know, where are we in this mix. So I think that your answer is perfect, and that is, hey, let's make sure we're talking with our legal counsel too, because this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not, job hunting is not the kind of thing that people do every day. I mean, they might do it every day for a period of days or weeks or maybe even months, but hopefully it's irregular. And when you're talking about a student, they're typically going to have at least a couple of jobs a year, an internship, job in the summer, maybe part-time job when they're in school, whatever. So they are actually job hunting more than us old folks are on average. But even if they're looking for a new position every few months, it's every few months. And it's not the sort of thing that they do every day. So very, very few people are professional job hunters. There are some out there. I know some. But it's not, it's kind of like for most of us, if we're buying a car, I mean, every time you go and buy a car, it's kind of a new experience. And there are always new things that are happening. And the dealer is clearly always going to know more than the average person. So if you go into a dealer and you tell him, hey, I do a lot of mountain driving in Colorado in the winter, right? And they sell you a Ferrari, with high performance tires, and tell you to go knock yourself out, you're going to love it. I gotta believe there's some negligence potential there. And even if there's not, it's just the wrong thing to do. And I agree with you, the vast majority of people in our industry are in it for the right reasons. Like when we're looking to hire people, that's part of what we're looking for. Do you care about helping people find employment? Do you care about that? And you'd be surprised how many people really don't.
That's true.
And that's okay, right? I mean, we can't all, want to save the whales and, hug trees and, whatever all the time. We have to sort of pick our battles. But if we're in this to help people find careers, then I do think we have an obligation to them to be presenting information to them that will help them with that, and that isn't going to lead to them having ruined credit for the next 12 years.
Well, Steve and Heather, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to really put this into a context that I think that we can digest better. And I think that we've all known this, but now after watching this webinar and engaging in it, I think it's easier to digest and gives us some really good action items to move forward. So I thank you for being part of the symposium. For those of you that are here, we're going to start our next session here in about 16 minutes. The day's not over yet. We still got a lot of great stuff coming up. So again, Steve and Heather, thank you so much, and take good care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.